sounds like something else is going to be happening.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lizard Brains podcast. I'm your host, DJ Alessandrini. I'm joined by my co-host, Tom McGorman. And as you heard during the intro, Greg Kramer is joining us. Greg Kramer, how are you doing?
I am great, guys. I'm delighted to be on this with you. I truly am. It should be fun.
We're happy to have you. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Dude, we have in my opinion, we have the voice of North American road racing with us today. I don't know if that's overplaying, underplaying, Greg. I hope it's the compliment I mean it to be, but I'm super excited to have you with us.
Well, I take it as the compliment, and I'll get you that 20 later. I promise.
Perfect.
So I was talking with the intern at work today, and I said, we're going to have Greg Kramer on the podcast tonight. And he's like, I've heard that name before, but I don't know where that is. I'm like, if you heard his voice, you'd be like, I know who that is. So I bet there's a lot of people, Greg, who's like, maybe they don't necessarily know the Greg Kramer name, but they definitely know the Greg Kramer voice.
Yeah, I do get that a lot. I'll be talking to somebody, or so people will be talking, and they'll introduce me, and you can kind of see the kind of look in the person's face, and then I'll say, "Hey, nice to meet you," etc. And pretty soon they go, "Oh, I know that voice."
Yeah.
So it does happen, and I mean, not a lot of on camera on broadcasting these days, especially streaming. So, not often seen too much and especially now that I don't do a lot of pit reporting anymore. So it's more just the audible end of things, I guess. But I do get recognized every once in a while.
Sure. I was going to ask if you haven't recognized his voice yet. Greg, I feel like the thing that you are known for is the boom. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Can you give us a good boom to start the
during
podcast?
qualifying? Yeah,
Yeah.
I do tend to do that.
Does he gotta get in character?
When somebody takes the top time, it'll be like an Alessandrini coming out of the last turn. Will he? Boom! New pole.
There it is.
Oh, that gave me chills. Oh, I like hearing my name to the top. Sucks to suck, Tom.
Yeah.
I've said it plenty of times over with Tom too.
Yeah. I have a clip that I've pulled multiple times from GLTC, but it's such a false clip because it's like halfway through the session. And you did an amazing job building it up, but then the session goes on for a little bit and I wasn't on pole by the end of it. But I still pull that audio all the
you
time.
pulled
I'm
that
like,
clip.
yeah.
It's the framing.
Yeah. Well, and it comes down to, it's in that moment that, that's just, I get amped, and that's the when a new fast time is set, it's, and I got to be honest. I mean, obviously I love calling racing, but to me, qualifying is that special moment because you're not worried too much about strategy. You're not worried too much about anything else. It's just extracting the absolute maximum that the car can give you and that you're capable of pulling out of it. And so to me, that's anytime somebody sets a significant time that is a new pole time in that moment. To me, that's exciting stuff. Somebody
100%.
has dug deep and found it. It may not end up staying there, but it was a hell of a lap.
Right.
I mean, in Formula One, that's the only racing that there is basically the whole weekend. The rest of it is just like how much you're managing the tires. Like qualifying is like basically the race.
Well, and I'll tell you, I didn't call the F1 race in Miami for the full track like I did in the inaugural year on the big screens. I called it for the Concourse Club Hospitality Suite. And I got to tell you, you're right. Calling the qualifying was far more exciting than the actual racing, which is, again, it's so strategy driven and you got to stay on top of this, that, and the other thing. But I'll tell you, even more than normal Formula One qualifying, calling the sprint qualifying was the most exciting hour of race announcing I've done in a long time, because even that is compressed, based on a regular Formula One qualifying where it's 18, however it breaks down.
20
for sprint, everything's
top 15, top 10.
Yeah. But it's the same thing for sprint, but the time for Q1, Q2, Q3 are each one of them is compressed. So it's just pinging the whole time.
Yeah.
And I got done with that. And I mean, I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. I was just absolutely lit. after calling that. And and even there, more so in their regular qualifying, that's one of the few qualifying sessions where there's actual strategy because they could burn their tires off if they push too hard early in a lap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sure.
And and that's been a thing. And I think that's where Max has really set himself apart, not just in racing but in the qualifying. Is you watch, and rarely is he the fastest guy in the first sector.
That is true. Yeah, I
That's
didn't think about that.
Yep, second and third sectors, he just smokes everybody. And Leclerc or whoever goes out and they're wicked fast in that first sector, and they got nothing left by the time they start that third sector. So even there's some strategy. But yeah, I love quali, always have.
Isn't it wild that the technology is in a place where they can literally burn the tire off the car in less than one lap if they try to go too fast?
Yeah, yeah. And it isn't like the days where you had the gumball tires and you could crank it up to 1400 horsepower for a
Yeah.
a quality run. It's just that they, with the uh, you with the hybrid extra power, and if they do their prep lap right, I mean they're basically at 1,000 horsepower. And
Yep.
those soft tires, depending upon where in the range of the five tire options the soft tire sits, yeah, it can be pretty dicey at the
Yeah,
end.
but hold on. Let's keep in mind that those tires are literally designed to fall apart.
That's what I was going to say
Yeah.
is I was talking to somebody who was an engineer for within Bridgestone and Firestone, and they were
Hmm.
talking about obviously there's the IndyCar engineering that they do now, but at a time Bridgestone was a supplier for Formula One, and the person who I won't give away, I got the impression it's not supposed to be talked about, but they were like, if we were to have to design a tire to have a specific degradation pattern and thing that needs to be met within the series wishes, then this is how we would do it, but not we wouldn't do it this way. It was
Yeah,
very much like
yeah.
it was almost like that was part of the very short punch list of things that needs to happen is we need a tire. It needs to say Bridgestone on the side. It needs to fall off this time, in the race. And it's like,
it's
man,
it's actually
that's
kind of
wild.
it's actually kind of amazing what I'm forgetting who makes the tires. Pirelli. Like they have these tires that like literally fall off in like this like predictable manner, and all of them like they do like it's like a video game, right? Like that's what they basically turned
Hmm.
F1 into, is where like all these tires have like wildly different characteristics as far as like wear, pace, right? Like they might be able to make
Oh
like the
yeah.
best of all worlds, but like part of the game is like preserving the tires. Like that's the game that they've built around like the Formula One sport.
Yeah.
The racer in me wonders what it would be like if it was like still like, set the fastest laps you can for, and then like just who's driving faster, whose car's faster, whose driver's faster. Like that's the person who wins the race. A lot of times right now it's like whose tires seem to be in the window better while also setting a faster lap time. Like that's whose cars are like winning races.
Well, I agree. And I mean, even down to the chassis, I mean, some of the cars are much better on the mediums
Yeah.
than other cars. Other cars are much better on the softs than other cars. And so you've got that, but there's a little bit of churn that'll create. So you got to strategize around it. But getting back to what you were saying about burning off the softs, remember, if when you're racing the softs, and in quality, the car's as light as it's going to get, but you can still manage the softs and make them last 10, 15 laps. So that goes back to what you were talking about, Tomo, is just how hard they push in those push laps in quali, because those are tires that can go 15 laps, but they decimate them in one lap. And then you also look at when they're on a soft on heavy fuel, if they're starting to get that launch, they're running what, 5, 6 seconds off their qualifying pace. So they have to take care. It's just there's so much going on there, and I'm kind of with you, DJ. In a way, I like the days when you were all on, pretty much on bricks, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Let's see how
driving,
fast they can go.
yeah.
Yep.
Who can find the grip on a low grip tire? That's the best driver out there. So I I agree with you on a lot of those points.
I don't know if you've ever driven a lap 7 seconds off your pace before, but that would feel like some pedestrian stuff out there. You'd just be cruising.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
boring.
having to repeat it and repeat it
Yeah.
and repeat it. And and that's the thing that to me still, at that level, Formula One, top level in sports car racing, IndyCar, whatever, is having that gift in the seat of your pants of being able to feel when that gallon or 2 gallons of fuel burns off, and be able to sense on a tire that degraded a little bit more in that lap. Yes, I can go this much faster without throwing it
Yeah.
off the track. And then repeating it the next lap and the next lap. That's incredible stuff when you think about it.
It really is, yeah. I can think of stints I've had to fuel save and the level that I am not having to like I'm not practicing it. I'm just doing it in the moment because it's Thunderhill 25 hour or something. Like these guys are doing that level of management week on week and week and week and week in
I mean,
different circumstances. Everything it's incredible.
you can
But
imagine how good you'd get at managing all those systems, like with enough reps, though. Like you'd be,
dude, they have to be so good. They
you
have to be so
Yeah.
you
good.
would just be so in tune with it. Like, I mean, you watch them, like they're changing like settings, like as they're driving, like from corner to corner to like fuel load to this. Like you'll see it on the screen, like diff changes, everything, like from literally from corner to corner. So it is like they're like manipulating a video game that also goes like 220 miles an hour. So Formula One's wild.
I don't know.
It's a weird it's a weird form of racing that is pretty entertaining to watch.
Every
some
once
of
in a
the
while
time.
we do our little Formula One detour. But Greg, were you off this weekend doing something fun? Off somewhere commentating? Did
Actually,
you have a
this
good
past
weekend?
weekend, I had a great weekend, but I had to go up to my hometown for a funeral in northern Minnesota, and then just drove down to Minneapolis and spent a couple of days with my daughter, and we just always have a blast. So that was great fun.
That's amazing. This is a good
A
time
little
of
bit
year
of
for
an
that
off
up
weekend.
there.
Ah, beautiful time.
Yeah.
Beautiful time. Yeah, I land back here in Florida after being up in the Midwest in the summer, and it's like, what the hell am I doing down here?
Yeah.
But then again, midwinter, it'd be like, what the hell am I doing up here?
Sure.
Well, I think you say the same thing in the Midwest too. Like we get all
Oh yeah.
the worst of all the world. So in the spring,
Yep.
it's really nice though. Tom, what did you do this weekend?
I I went coaching
I was
at
gonna say
Autobahn. I went
I
to
know what you did. So if
I
you
had to think for
forget,
a second. Yeah. I was just coaching on Sunday with Jason Wynn. Greg, have you commentated Jason Wynn in GLTC yet?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so he
Yep.
was out testing for the Autobahn round that comes up in a couple months.
Okay.
And just wanted some dedicated driver development, which was super fun. What did you do, DJ? You were
Tom?
autocrossing?
Nope.
Nope.
I did a lot of sim
Fixing
coaching.
a deck?
Nope. No deck got painted. I think I was supposed to, but we never even talked about it, Christine. Yeah, just a lot of sim coaching, sim racing. Tom, I finally got over 7,000 I rating. So,
Woo! Come
go
on,
me.
2024 goals.
Well, I'm only 1,000 away. I'm gonna have to be a lot better before I get to 8,000 because those guys are kind of on another level. I can hang with them at like tracks I know, like Road Atlanta. But this last week it was Silverstone with the Porsche Cup car, and man, people are on another level. They're just so fast. So
They're so
what-
practiced. Greg, have you done much iRacing driving? I know you're doing commentating now because it's
Not a lot of driving.
taken off.
I haven't driven. Really, the last. I'm dating myself huge here, but the last time I really did any, and I heavy quotations here, serious driving on a game. It wasn't a sim by any means. A game was the old IndyCar 2 game way back when. So I haven't done. I sat in. I went up to Court's place, who does full send sims, and sat there. And when I've been at the Concourse Club, when he's got sims down there, I'll do a little driving. But really haven't done a whole lot of driving in it. But boy, I'll tell you, the amount of realism compared to what they used to have is just off the hook. But I'm having a blast doing the iRacing announcing. And that I have a question that I got to ask you guys: is why aren't both of you racing with us Tuesday nights?
which one is Tuesday nights?
It's the Full Send Sims Spec Miata series, and it is furious. It's
DJ,
so fun.
that's got your name written all over it.
No, I think they use they use the NC, right?
Yeah, the NC, but
Yeah.
it's also with some weight added because the whole idea
Oh,
is they
that's
don't
gonna make
want
it
it
even
to be
worse.
the MX. They don't want it to be the MX-5. They want it to be a spec Miata.
So I did a big esports thing in 2019 in the NC, and I
Mhm.
drove that car enough to never want to drive it again, Greg, because to me that car does not drive very much like a car. It's just really old, and it's very video gamey. And I went full video gamey in it to win that thing. And like I don't want to drive that car ever again, because it's just, there's so many other cars that drive more like cars in iRacing. So if I'm going to dedicate time to something, I want to drive something that to me drives like a car, or like working on some weaknesses that I have as a driver. Like those are the things I want to spend time on. When it comes to like Miata racecraft, like figuring out a way to win, I feel like I feel like that's one of my strengths. So I'm not going to spend time trying to like just, kind of pound my strength in. I want to try to
Yeah.
focus on my weaknesses. So
Well, and the other thing, one of the things that we do is Court is, he really believed, because he came from military sim background, and then he's a racer, so we put those two things together. So his deal is to use it as a training tool as much as possible. And one of the things that we do now is, if there's a big SCCA race at a certain venue, or FARA has become a partner of ours now. If there's a big race, say at Road America, we race Tuesdays that weekend.
yeah,
They'll look at the schedule and they'll try and race at Road America, so that people that are racing Spec Miata in SCCA or NASA or FARA, they can get that little bit of extra time. So that's
yeah,
kind of why we stick with it.
yeah. To me, it would be better practice if they just used the ND, even though it's just like
Mm.
flappy paddle and it's not H pattern, because like we don't need practice shifting H pattern, and also the iRacing H pattern doesn't really act like a real gear shift selector, anyways. And the way that the ND Miatas draft is more akin to how they would draft in real life. The NCs don't nearly draft as nearly as much as they should. But here's a fun fact: I looked up that IndyCar 2 game that you mentioned.
Yeah,
The people who made that in 1995 ended up becoming the people who made iRacing. Did you know that?
I did not.
So
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
I was
so
wondering if it was because I had this. I think I had either it was a cart two. You said
IndyCar
IndyCar
2.
2, technically. Yeah.
IndyCar two. Sorry, I had one of those for PC. This came up with Randy as well. It was like I'm sorry, the Team PGR Tesla guys. They were talking about gaming. I think, right?
I think
They
so.
were talking
Yeah.
about like
So
DOS games.
it was
And
developed.
it was
Yep.
a DOS IndyCar game. And my parents tell this story where I was like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, however old we were when DOS was where the games were. And the leader like came in for a pit, and I like followed the leader into the pit lane, and it's all simulation, right? So it doesn't take over for my 7-year-old brain. And I just like take out the leader in the pit lane and crash him, and then try to keep driving as a 7-year-old on my computer.
Wait, was it? Could you play online?
No, no,
No.
no. It's
Okay.
just
Okay.
racing the
Okay. I
computers.
was thinking, wow,
That was terrible.
I was thinking that would be really advanced for 95. I don't even think high speed internet was a thing.
If it was 95, then I would have been 4 or 5 years old, not 7 or 8.
Yeah, but
Which
that's
is even
fine.
worse.
Well, it would have been like 3 years old or whatever. I was playing this like flying sim game that like came out when I was 3, but I have memories of it. That doesn't necessarily mean I was playing it when it was 3. Like,
Well,
Right.
and I'll tell you, the one thing about IndyCar 2, which makes sense now that the iRacing people went in, that was the first game where you could actually trail brake and it worked. You
Oh,
know,
it wasn't just like on-off switches for
no, you
yes
could
or no break.
actually, yeah, you could, there was actually, what is it, a potentiometer or whatever that you'd brake and then trail off, and it would point the nose into the
in
corner and all
95?
that, and it was fun. Yeah, yeah, it
Dude,
was
that's
actually,
cool.
it was pretty cool. And I got to tell you, I had my one really fun moment driving that game. Was I got asked to, when Team Cool Green got their 5-year extension with Cool Cigarettes, and they did it was one of the very first press conferences that also included like an online call-in thing. It was really new. They asked me to MC it, so I went to Louisville, and in the hotel conference center where we're doing that, all these chairs for the media that were going to be there, and the dais where we were up on, but they had two of the current highest level sims that had they had IndyCar 2 on it, and so the VIPs and the media people could race, and all the drivers were there. So it was Paul Tracy, Dario Franchitti, and I can never remember the guy's name. I could picture him, who was going to run their Indy Lights car from England, and they were all there, and you could sit and race them, right? So at the end of the night, people are
Cool.
done, everything's cool, and Bert was his name, the head of Cool, came over and said, "Greg, you want to take one of these guys on?" And I went, yeah, sure, it'd be fun. And so Paul said, come on, Greg, because I'd known Paul a little bit at that point. So we sit down and the guy said, any particular place you want to run? And I said, well, I'm most familiar probably with Road America. And they went, we've got that. So they put it in. So Paul and I did this race. So we had other cars in it too, but they dialed them back a little bit. So, and at the start, Paul got in the lead and it was like a 5-lap race. And I stayed on his rear wing for the whole race, and a couple of times showed the nose, moved over, couldn't get it done, tucked back in. And after about 3 laps, I noticed Paul literally is going,
Who is this
looking over
guy?
at me, going, "How the hell is this guy doing this?" And on the last lap, I actually got a great run coming out of the carousel, and I thought maybe I could do him here. And then I overshot the kink a little bit and dropped the tire, and that was it. But we get done, and he's looking at me, going, "How the hell did you do that?" And I said, "Well, I got to confess." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Last weekend, I just spent a whole weekend at a buddy of mine's house who has this game, and all I did was drive this game at Road America." So, but that was kind of a fun moment.
like a pool shark or pool swindler
Exactly.
or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The
Um.
ringer.
So so which came first? I kind of know a little, but which came first? Your love for racing or your commentary path? And how did each begin? Like, did one lead to the
Yeah.
other?
Oh, indirectly.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. But a love of racing was first.
Okay.
I grew up as a very little lad in Europe, and I was over there for 8 years, and 6 of them were in Germany.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, and my last 2 years there, my, my dad, in an effort to get me to be a little bit better, I wasn't a bad student, but I had a real issue being on time to class.
Oh,
Uh, and so he said, if you cannot be tardy for this entire next semester, I'll take you to the Nürburgring.
cool.
And that was 1967. I'm dating myself here.
That's like Disney World in Germany.
Oh my God. And I was already a fan because at that time in Europe, the two major, they didn't have pro ball, basketball, hockey, and all that stuff. They had soccer and motorsports. And those were the big things. So I was already really interested in it. So when he said, if you could do this, man, I'll tell you, I was early for an entire 4 months. And we went and saw the 1967 1000K at the old Nürburgring. And I mean, that was just unbelievable.
That's so
And
cool.
then, yeah, and then the fall or the summer of 1968, my folks didn't take me. They literally stuck me on a train for a 3-hour train ride, and some friends picked me up at the train station, and we went and watched the 68 German Grand Prix, which was the race that Jackie Stewart won by over 4 minutes in the rain, and considered one of the greatest drives in history. Period. And that was it. Hook was set. Game over.
Do you remember
And
specifics of being there, or you learned
oh yeah.
in hindsight like that was a big deal that I was there?
Oh no no no. I remember specifics. At the
Whoa.
six at the 67,000K. One of the things I remember was that race ran like 7 hours, and we had sun, we had rain, we had snow, right? And that was, I remember a
It's like
guy that I'd
Minnesota.
been, yeah, a guy that I'd been following named Gerhard Mitter had a really good run and everything. And David Hobbs and John Surtees made a debut in a Lola, basically a Lola T70 coupe with an Aston Martin V8 in the back. And it was fast as hell, but it was really heavy, and they didn't last very long. I mean, these are the little things that I remember picking up on. In '68, a whole lot more memories there. One I remember, we pulled, and I mean, it was pouring rain, and we pulled up, and there was a practice session going on, and they stopped it was a van. It wasn't a VW van, but it was some similar. And I jumped out of the car and started to run to the fence, slipped, and I hadn't been at the track 10 seconds, and I slipped into this ditch, and I got out and I was covered in mud. Hadn't been there 10 seconds, and went to the fence and just sat there glued for that session. And when the session was done, I was pretty much clean. It was raining that
Oh,
hard,
cool. All
right?
right. Well,
Wow.
hey, convenient.
Um,
That would have sucked if it stopped
yeah,
raining
yeah,
right at that moment.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But you know, the memories that I have was it had been so bad Saturday that Sunday morning they did one more practice session, and then they didn't have qualifying, if you will. It was all any practice session, whatever your best time from any was what kind of set the grid. And they requalified, and Graham Hill was on pole. Stewart was sixth. Chris Amon was second, and all that. And when the race started, Stewart came by us. We were about halfway around the track, and he was third. And then we could hear the speakers when he went by at the end of the first lap. He had a 9-second lead. He came by us, and it was up to 15 seconds. When he completed the lap, it was 20 seconds, and it was just unbelievable what he was doing. Um, and the two things that I remember, well, yeah, another quick story. Dan Gurney was obviously racing, and I didn't know this at the time, but that it was the first time a driver in Formula One used a full face helmet.
Oh, they didn't
Um,
even have. They were so what? They were just getting like
uh,
destroyed in the face by the rain.
well, it was either goggles, the old thing. Stewart had a visor, almost like a snowmobile visor, like would come down, and he was utilizing one of those. There's a picture there that Tom would just found
Is that the
from
is
that
that the
race.
visor? Because he kind of looks
That's the
like a
visor.
stormtrooper.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a visor that clamped to the top of the helmet and then came down like that. And you can see a lot of the guys were running Lotuses, were running those super high wings and everything. And Stewart did all the practices without a wing, and then they put this little one on. But at any rate, he was flying, and Gurney was actually second fastest guy in the race. But that Westlake V12, it was fouling plugs in the wet or shorting plugs in the wet, and he'd run like a lap or two, just come by, just screaming by, and then the next lap he'd come by, and
Oh,
he'd pit, and they'd have to change all plugs to, so however long that took, then he'd come back out and just fly for 2 or 3 laps, and then same thing. But the two things that just really stuck in my head were one, Stewart, and I didn't know it at the time, but he had a Dunlop rein, which is better than the other reins. It wasn't that great. I mean, it wasn't that much better, but Stewart was just in a zone that day. It was Senna-esque what he was doing. But he would come into our turn, and it was up a rise, would turn in front of us. It was down a ways, and then fade away down the hill. And you'd hear everybody else coming up that hill, and it'd be bam, bam, bam. And then once the lap, Stewart would be coming up, bam, 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 just so much crisper, so much faster, and just flow through that corner and be gone. And the other thing that I remember was Jochen Rindt in the Brabham Repco had a bubble shield, which was pretty common. The one Stewart used was kind of new, but a lot of them used the old bubble shield. And I kid you not, guys, even at my age, I recognized that this was nuts what I was seeing.
Yeah.
Because he would come up, he'd do his downshifts, turn into the corner, and as he'd accelerate out of the corner and it would start to slide, he'd reach up while he's sideways and wipe the outside of his bubble, reach down, straighten the car out, start to fade down the hill, make his upshift to the next gear, and it would skate a little bit, and he'd still reach up and wipe the inside of the bubble and then head down the hill. And I just remember going, that's just nuts.
all those guys were kind of a little bit of insane people.
Oh,
I think the only people like that now are people who race motorcycles. Like all those people.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. These guys back in that era, in the mid '60s to mid '70s in particular, they were, I often say race drivers are wired differently, but these guys were really gladiators.
Yeah, really.
Because,
Yeah.
if you look at pictures from that race, that's 14 and a half miles, and that one shot you got there might be one of the few pieces of barrier anywhere. It was
Yeah.
it was a grass verge in that era. I remember talking to David Hobbs when he started racing at the Nürburgring in the early '60s. He said most of that track at that point it had hedge on the edge of the track. And he said you knew when you got done with a really good qualifying lap, in a full-bodied car, because you come in, if there were scratches in your mirrors from the hedges, you knew you got everything out of that lap. I mean, just crazy what they were doing.
Yeah, I have this thought about because now obviously within our landscape of motorsports, there's more entertainment value. I would say, like they push the entertainment value. Let's say so. There's obviously
Yes.
drifting, and there's stadium trucks, and there's the traditional motorsports that we all love, like Formula One, IndyCar, IMSA, Le Mans, that kind of stuff that we all get to partake in to a level. But I find myself the more and more that I'm in this, and the more I'm around it watching things like the two that stand out to me right now are I don't know, Greg, if you still watch IndyCar, but the IndyCar qualifying session from Road America like 2 or 3 weeks ago when it was in drying conditions from full wet to
Yes.
full dry over that period of time. Guys, if you haven't watched this, I'm not really an IndyCar like fanatic. I think it's really cool, but I watched this session and I was thinking, I don't think I could do that. Like I was so blown away by these guys and it was just incredible. And then also a little throwback to us, Greg. We commentated the SCCA runoffs race T3,
Hmm.
I think, together
Yeah.
in a hurricane condition. It was Touring Threes, the class, sorry. And these drivers, they're you and I. They're like our friends and people we know and
Yeah.
club drivers. And they drove through hurricane, literally a hurricane, to race to the championship for this race. And we're watching this race with 20 minutes to go, and it's just downpouring. You can't see anything, raining sideways through the camera screen. These guys are like basically hydroplaning everywhere. We're like, how are they surviving? No crashes, no full course yellows. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I mean, I would have loved to have been out
Yeah.
there to find out, but I don't know if I would have been as happy to be out there as they seem to be.
Well, and
Um,
I agree because that was the one afterwards. I turned to you, I think, and I said, we need to start a movement to get the entire field of T3 to win the President's Cup
and I think they
because
did.
all the races around them, massive full course yellows and incidents and all that. And these guys, when it was at its absolute worst, put on an absolutely superb and it's spectacular race. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great. And I agree with you. And going back to your IndyCar thing about the wet drying track, I think it was 1993 at Sebring when Steve Millen and Johnny O'Connell were running the Nissan 300ZX twin turbos. They had rain, and I'm trying to remember. I think there was a another session or whatever. So qualifying time for the GTS field was what it was called at that time. It was literally a wet track with two dry lines, like a stagecoach path, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you missed it by that much, you were off, right? And all these people were going out there and they were pushing, but you could tell they had something in reserve. Steve Millen went out there. Not only did he put it on pole, he absolutely shattered the track record. And I remember thinking the same thing the at that speed, that focus to hit everything perfectly, to not miss your line by 2 inches. Because if you
Yeah.
do, you're going to hit that wet, and off you're going to go. Again, that's why I say the great drivers, they're just wired differently. That's the only way to put it.
So, Greg, I have a question. What
Yeah.
are there like cuz you bring up like you brought up a specific moment from 1993. I'm wondering, do you think there's like certain ingredients that make like an unforgettable cuz that moment for you is unforgettable,
Right.
right? So, what makes an unforgettable motorsports moment? Like what are the ingredients necessary for it to stick in people's heads for decades?
Well, I think for me, um, it's a level of execution above anything you can really imagine, let alone expect, right? That
Yeah.
moment by Millen, Jeff Brabham in the Nissan in that same era, late at night at Sebring, and this was before they had even the level of lights that they have now. I mean, it was pitch black. Broke the track record, at about 9:30, 10 at night, and I asked him, afterwards. I said, "How the hell can you do that?" And he made a great point to me. But to me, one, that was just extraordinary. Pitch
Yeah.
black, and he breaks the track record. And then two, when I asked him how, he said, "Well, he said all the things that give you the sensation of speed, which thus give you fear, in the dark are gone. So all you're doing is, he said, all I'm doing is breaking point, turn in, apex, track out." And he said, I had no clue I'd done that because that lap did not feel any that much different than anything else. He said, I just happened to clip all those things perfectly, apparently, in that lap, you know. Um, but I think it's that. I mean, to me, one of the most outstanding moments ever that I've seen in anything. was, and I got to make sure I get the year right here, 95 Formula One Montreal. And I hadn't been to a Formula One race for a long time. So, I mean, that was just amazing, right? And it ended up being Jean Alesi's first and only Formula One win. And it started wet in the day, and he just destroyed everybody in the morning warm up. But the come race time, bone dry, everything's great. And the race gets underway. Schumacher's leading, Damon Hill is second, and Alesi's third. And Schumacher is gapping everybody a bit. And lap after lap, and that was back when they had the long hairpin. Now it's shortened quite a bit from what it used to be. And I had these seats. Vicky O'Connor of the Formula Atlantic Series had seats and gave me one of her tickets, and it was just this amazing view. And lap after lap, we had a big screen, so that the chicane right after you go under that little bridge at Montreal, and then it does that right left chicane, and then feeds you through the forest into the hairpin. Lap after lap, Alesi would come in like this to Hill, and wasn't enough. Hill would ease over, and Alesi tuck in, right? And on this one lap, I'm watching, and of course, I'm sitting with all these French Canadians, and keep this in mind too. Alesi is driving at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in a Ferrari, carrying Villeneuve's number 27 number. So all these French Canadians are going nuts, right? And of course, Alesi's French. So anyway, on this one lap, as they make that turn in, I see Hill, one of those moments. And I tapped the guy next to me, and I went, this time. And I didn't really know that it was going to happen, but I just said, why? I just wanted him to watch. And guys, they came out from the trees. And this time Alesi got here. Hill moved over, and there was enough room between Hill's right side tires and the grass for a Ferrari and a sheet of paper. I swear to God. And they're going 200 miles an hour. And Alesi got here, and they went down 6 gears to 50 miles an hour. Never moved, never touched. And then at the end of it, Hill went, you got me, and turned in. And I just got chills again thinking about that, because
Cool.
to me, that was two professionals executing at the very highest level with not even an inch to spare, going from 200 miles an hour down to 50 with hard braking into that hairpin, not making a mistake, never touching. And then the guy that was being overtaken had the class to go, the better man won.
Yeah.
That is, and I have said to people so many times when, all the producers, they want to show wrecks, when they do a highlight thing. And I
Yeah.
go, I said, you understand wrecks are failures, right? And I said, I know they're exciting, but throw in some of these stunning passes and let us go nerd on those for a minute, because that's what racing is to me.
Yeah. That's okay, so I wrote down a handful of questions that I thought it'd be fun to ask you, but as you're talking, I'm coming up with a whole different set of questions. So I have a question right now. With on this podcast, DJ and I have had a recurring theme of the discussion between talent versus effort. And we've only had it in terms of like driving. DJ is of the belief that there's no such thing basically as being a talented driver. There are people who put in a lot of work. There are people who maybe have characteristics that are more conducive to being a better driver. I tend to agree with your personality can absolutely, the traits you're born with, let's say, the nature that you have can make you a better or worse driver.
Natural
But
risk
as you're talking there,
taking, propensity for pressure, stuff like that.
yeah. So your recall of these
Mhm.
details and your ability to, like, you have a Rolodex of these races and these moments and these people's names and everything. What do you feel about, or what are your thoughts on the idea of talent versus effort? Do you feel like you were a talented commentator? Do you feel that you have personality traits that make you particularly good at like the fact that you're noticing details of the driver obviously tie into driving as well, which you've done. I want to get to that, but I'm just like fascinated by, have you ever thought about that? Do you feel like you were naturally born to be a commentator, to be a salesperson of this passion that you have?
Or the counter.
Well,
Hold on, Greg.
yeah,
Or the counter.
yeah.
Were you intrigued with it enough where you were so in love with the commentary or racing or whatever that you threw yourself at it so much that the really great, one of the all-time great commentators was created through your
Yeah,
passion for the thing.
yes.
You know, like I think that there are drivers, the truly great drivers, they have what I call the gift. And it's like Nicky Lauda said, and it was, famously reproduced in the movie Rush when he said, I wasn't born with a lot of something, but I got a great ass. Right. And he's talking about feeling. He could feel, all these things. And I think that's innate, that, having that level. I think you can, you can approach it, you can learn it, to a degree. But if you've got that gift, in terms of the announcing thing, to me, I think it's a little of each, because all I wanted to do when I was young was be a race driver, and I didn't come from money, and I looked at a couple options. Well, maybe I'll get into engineering, and I didn't have those kind of smarts, and I started doing this little cable show, 30 minutes a week in the Minneapolis area, where I just go out. I covered snowmobile racing. I covered ice cars in the winter. I did solo and autocross. And then when there'd be a race at Brainerd, I'd go just whatever I could do. Right. Um, but that was more like a show thing.
Yeah.
And, the interesting thing was, I love it that DJ mentioned sales, because I hate sales. I absolutely cannot. I don't like selling things. Right. But maybe it's because I never really believed in them. Maybe that's what it was. But when I got my one opportunity to actually announce, and it was filling in for this announcer in the snowmobile race that got sick, I got done with that weekend, and it was like the light bulb went off, because I'd been going through this period. I wouldn't say depression, but where all I really care about is racing, and I don't know how I can make a career out of it. And the light bulb went off, and it wasn't just maybe this is what I could do for a career, but I got done going, that was the most fun I've had in a long time. And so then at that point, I started pushing, doing what I could to try and find more gigs, more work, more whatever, and the like. And I've got to say, I think one of the things that helped me immensely in my announcing was corner working,
Yeah.
because,
Huh.
yeah, and there are people on a corner that they're just watching for the incident, whatever. I would stand there on the corner, and a lot of people, they hated being on what they call safety, which is you're not flagging. You're just, if there's an incident, you're just by yourself. You're not doing anything, so you respond. But I loved it, because I would literally stand there and I'd listen for down changes. Where are they braking? How are they doing this? What's going on? Watching that little moment when the cards start to move. I just was fascinated by it, and I absolutely, loved it. And so I think that observation of detail, I mean, it had practical applications to the flagging too, because if I could see a car have a moment a little earlier than somebody else, I might be ready on that yellow a little fast, all that kind of thing. But I just would come away from it, And I remember another, moment that's a guy named Claude Bourbonnais, who I think, could have been the first guy to win Canada a world championship. I think he was that talented, and it's really sad what happened to him eventually. But I'd seen him at the runoffs when he showed up in a Formula Continental and destroyed the field. And I mean, we're talking a really good Formula Continental field at the runoffs, and he destroyed them. And I was working turn 5, and he was coming through 5 so much faster than anybody else. And I realized he was carrying a gear higher through there. And I noticed later when he raced Formula Atlantic at Road Atlanta, he was carrying a higher gear through turn 1. And just these things that I'd listen to, and I go, oh, wait a minute, he didn't go down 3 gears, he only went down 2. And I'd watch the speed, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that learning those kind of powers of observation really helped me in the booth. And then when I started driving, even more so. But I think a lot of that corner working really helped.
Oh, so I was gonna ask about the racing stuff that you did, because remind me, it was Improved Touring Corolla?
Yeah, it was ITC and a Toyota Starlet when I started. Yeah.
Starlet, that's right. I knew it was
Yeah.
a Toyota. ITC. Okay, so you were commentating before you raced.
Yes.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
hold on.
started because first thing I started doing was flagging.
Yeah, yeah.
really,
Wait,
with
I
cars.
got to ask more about the commentary stuff. So when
Yeah.
when you were commentating, was there a way for you to review like how you did, and then you would like what was the process like to try to get as good at the commentary as possible? Or did the words just like flow out naturally, or were you like brainstorming like little sayings and things to say and ways to describe things? Or would you watch other commentary? Like what did the process look like to try to get as good at the commentary as possible?
Well, I mean, prior to the, TV stuff, it was really tough to go back and check what I was doing because they weren't, if I was just doing public address, nobody was really recording those.
Yeah, yeah, good
You
point.
know, so I didn't have air checks, say to go back and listen to. So my being able to really, go back and look at and listen to what I was doing was when I started doing TV. But I don't really remember DJ ever thinking I want to, I want this to be my phrase, or I want to use this, or I want to do that. You know, I, the one thing I know from the very beginning, and it's still true today, is when the green flag drops, I'm all in. And so, when it would go, it was just like blah. I mean, I would talk about what I was seeing, trying to tell people, with the PA, it started wherever I'm announcing from, there's another 2/3 of the track that aren't seeing that,
Yeah.
right? So trying to give them as vivid a description of what's going on as I possibly could. And that's just kind of where it started. Once I got to where I could go back and watch stuff, I noticed, little things that I would use as a crutch. When
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
a moment, it would be like obviously, you
Oh,
know, and I'd say that frequently or whatever. So I worked hard to not do that and not have the ums and ahs. It's better to just be quiet,
Yeah.
just be silent than So yeah, fortunately, I didn't do a lot of that, but I still would notice it. But it was just really just an absolute joy to be calling a race, and whether it was for PA, for TV, for whatever. Once that green flag dropped, man, I was just all into whatever was happening and just loved every minute of it. So it's just sort of, you know,
yeah.
So
I always joke that I black out during this podcast. That or any camera thing. It's like we'll I mean, for this podcast, I'll run into people, they'll be like, "Yeah, you said this." I'm like, "I
you're
don't
like,
know. I
really?
don't remember saying that." But even back through when I was doing any sort of media work for Honda or something, you black out when the camera they go, "Okay," and start talking, and you're like, "I hope that was good. I don't know what they got." But
what,
it's fascinating
yeah,
it sounds like you're a little more in that lane than I expected you to be in from like I know I want to hit these beats and I want to hit this, I want to make sure that the intro hits this and then that
right.
we segue this way and all that. It's it's almost more exciting to hear that it's just like kind of I love what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, and it sort of evolved with TV because when you start dealing with TV and radio to a degree, now you have formats, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you have to hit. But when it was PA and radio in a lot of ways, it was my show. When I'd start talking, it was me, unless I had somebody else in the booth with me. But then it was just us. We weren't scripted, we weren't to any specific time count, anything
Hmm.
like that, and we could just talk. Now there were times where a phrase, would pop into my head, that I thought was apropos or funny or whatever. I mean, one of my favorites was right after, and you'll recognize the movie. I was announcing at Le Mans, and there was this Lamborghini that was from the JLOC, a Japanese Lamborghini Owners Club. But it was fielded by Dams Motorsport, which of course is Drew Arnaud, Rene Arnaud, the French Formula One driver. And they had this massive wreck in qualifying. After their qualifying time had been set, the amateur driver got in and shredded the car. And there is a firm rule in the ACO rule book that if you have to change chassis, you're disqualified. You have to race the car you qualified.
Oh.
But every once in a while, when it was a French-owned team or a famous French driver, suddenly this force majeure thing would come in and all that. So anyway, so the race gets going, and this Lamborghini, there it is. This Lamborghini literally got out for the last 10 minutes of the morning warm up, and it's me, Dorsey, and Calvin in the booth. And like 30 minutes in, the car stops at one of the chicanes way off to the side, smoking. Right. And Dorsey said, "Well, it's not a surprise that car's out. They had this happen. It was a major rebuild. They got no time." And then Calvin made a comment. He said, well, he goes, and technically it probably shouldn't even have been racing because, and he kind of explained the rule and all that. And then he said, but it is fielded by Dams, and that's Drew Arnault Motorsport. So, and he just kind of paused, and it just popped into my head, and I said, well, I think we've come to learn here at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, as far as the ACO goes, that the rules regarding that particular element of the sport are a lot like the pirate code, more of a guide, really. And it's just every once in a while you get one of those
Parlay.
things that exactly that just pops into your head, and you throw it out there. But normally it's just you're so, at least me, I'm just in the moment, just
Yeah.
eating it up.
So what's the what are some things or something that you can learn from watching motorsports? If you're doing corner working, watching on TV, watching trackside, what are the biggest things you can learn as a driver? I would say that, I mean, I hope most of our listeners are drivers. That's kind of what we talk about most of the time. So I don't know what I don't know what you're listening for if you're not a driver, of some kind. But yeah, I'm curious. What are your thoughts?
Well, smooth is fast. I mean, it really becomes obvious when you're corner working and you watch a car come in that's being driven pretty rough, and then a car that comes in being driven well but smooth. It makes a big difference. I remember there was a guy, Mark Youngquist, who was ran the runoffs a number of times, and he was a local guy in Minneapolis, and I was at Brainerd, and he was struggling, and I knew he was quicker than what he was driving, and he was struggling, and I was working turn 10, and he came up to me afterwards and said, Greg, I know you're out there. Where are you working? I said, 10. He goes, I'm struggling there. Any ideas? And I said, from what I'm watching, I said, brake a little sooner and a little lighter, because you're so hard on the brake so late that the car's bouncing still. And he wasn't a left foot braker where he could start the brake to keep the nose down. And I said, brake a little sooner and just that a little bit lighter, because the car's still pogoing when you're turning in. And he went out the next day, and it was another day, and like dropped his time by half a second, and qualified on pole.
I never thought about asking
know,
people outside of the cars for, like, I'm thinking like at an autocross event, like if you had buddies that were working the course, like a 2-day event, you ask like, hey, day one, like, was anybody doing anything better than me? Like, what was it? And then you could like take that into day two of like, okay, yeah, I was like I was holding too much slip angle, or I was like I was charging too hard into whatever element this was. Like, you could take whatever feedback they give you with like a little bit of grain of salt, but some kind of perspective from outside of the car would actually probably be pretty useful. So like you pointing out that, hey, you're charging the corner, nobody else is, like that might be where you're losing time. Like that's like actually good information. I never really thought about pulling information from people outside of the car or the track.
Well, if they're dialed in corner workers, they're great observers.
Yeah.
And you think about it, when you go to a driver's school, you rarely have your coach or your instructor in the car with you. A lot of times they're on a corner watching,
Yeah.
and they can see things that that are happening, that just because of the franticness of a lap, or you might just not be sensing. And yeah, so I mean, I started doing that, and it's ironic you say that with the soloing and stuff, because when I was autocrossing, I had friends that I knew were really good drivers that were out obviously picking up cones, and I'd find them after a run and go, how'd I look? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And then every once in a while, I was at an ice car race, and I drove my Toyota Starlet down and raced it. And during the first practice session, there was a guy named Herm Johnson who was teamed up with Bill Payton, one of the front running cars. Herm, of course, raced at Indy, won a Super B championship, and had a couple of really good races at Indy. And he lapped me a few times because he was in a much faster car. And I found him afterwards, and I said, "Hey, Herm, I know you went by me a few times. How'd I look?" And he went, "Like a guy that's got to drive that car home." And I was like, "Oh,
oh no." So Greg, do you want to tell us a little bit about, so you started corner working, then you started commentating, then you started driving.
Mhm.
What does driver Greg look like? Like, what's
A
the
lot
history
younger.
behind driver Greg? Do you still drive?
I don't. I haven't. It got to a point where I realized, look, I don't have the budget to do this right. And the one thing, you know, outside of the car, I'm a fairly easygoing guy. Man, I get into my race calls. I love it. But man, I would put that helmet on, and I, I had to win. I had to, I just that was my deal. And I realized soon enough that I never was going to have the budget, no matter what I was racing in, to be able to really be competitive. And so I said, I better just focus my energies elsewhere. But the 10 years or so that I did drive were some of the best in my life. I loved it to death. And I started with the autocrossing, and then I did ice car racing because you didn't have to go through any licensing.
Yeah.
And I had some friends that liked what I was doing in autocrossing and said that had cars that they ran in the ice car racing, and they said, "You want to drive with me?" And I'd say, "Sure." And so that's really where the door to door stuff started. And that's still some of the most fun I've ever had in my life doing that, because it's a road course, actual road course out on a frozen lake, and they stud the tires, and you go. And we used to do 3 hour enduros with driver changes.
That sounds
You know,
incredible. Why doesn't that still happen?
it does up north, but it we tried to make it big, take it to, we created a series called Pro Ice. And Petey Cunningham, back when he was driving the Honda CRXs and Firehawk, he would come and bring his team in the winter. And Bill Pate, who was one of the front runners in Firehawk, he and Herm Johnson would come and race, and the Menards would come and race. And I mean, it was a big deal, but it just we just couldn't make it stay that big and work. But man, it was basically like combining road racing, sprint cars, and rallying. It was just all in one lap, man. It was a blast.
But it's so fickle. With you have to deal with the ice conditions, and you have to deal with the scheduling of all that, and you have to just hope it's all okay. Like, I remember last year when I was moving away from Wisconsin, they ended up having 0 snow, 0 ice condition the entire winter.
Yeah, so if that
Yeah.
was a
I
series, it
cannot
just
imagine organizing like a professional race series
yeah.
where it could just be like, "And sorry, it's too warm."
No season this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately for us, we never really had that issue because it was always, and you didn't need snow. You just needed
Right, right.
cold.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we had some great races. We always had plenty of ice. But what made it interesting was you had two different kinds of conditions. It was either warm enough that the ice chips that you'd chew up would melt. So then you'd have these big puddles. And sometimes the fast line was through the puddles because that's where a rut was. And you could, with the studs, get into that rut. You had amazing grip. And then but the spray was crazy. If you were following somebody, the other
Yep.
side of the coin was if it was really cold. I mean, I'm talking 10 below or more. It's so dry and it's usually no wind that the ice, instead of it chunks that would come up when it was soft, it would be dust and it would just hang. So you had the same, like, zero visibility.
Mm.
And that, those were the two conditions, but it was so fun. And it was the visibility. When I drove in my first rain race, it was more the visibility than being comfortable sideways that really played through. So it was just interesting to see that how that unfolded.
You know what helps with that,
That
Greg?
was
Ah,
Being at the front.
that's you are very true. But there were three classes, and we were in the slowest of the three.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
So
I'll give you a
yeah,
pass then. I'll give you a pass.
they had two front drive classes, and then I always ran rear drive because that was more fun.
Yeah, definitely more fun.
Yeah, yeah. But I get your point.
DJ definitely knew that Toyota Starlet was rear wheel drive. He 100% knew that.
I don't even know what that is. I could
I'll
Google
tell you,
it.
when I decided to go road racing in that thing, it was I've said, and it all started in a way with this was that one of the greatest tools that you can have as a race car driver is starting your career in a momentum car. so you learn how to carry speed. And in that Starlet, I mean, it was a 1.3 liter inline four that made like 70 horsepower, and we put headers on it, and it went right to like 73 or 74.
Does that look like your race car, Greg?
That looks way quicker, actually.
I found like
DJ found the
But,
coolest.
yeah.
I
Toyota
found the most
Starlet and
souped up
posted a
Toyota
picture.
Starlet I
that
could
is-
find.
I mean, that's that's pretty much. I didn't have the flares around the rear wheels and stuff, but that's it. And it was the last. And what was cool, it was the last year of the Starlet, and then the Corolla. I think, Tom, that's why you thought Corolla. The next year, the Corolla was going to replace it, and so it had the Corolla brakes, which were a much bigger rotor on the front.
Yes,
So
much
that little
bigger on
thing,
their 13-inch
it
wheels.
didn't have any top speed, but I'd go by the 1 meter, or the one brake marker, and just giggle for a while and then brake,
Right,
because
yeah.
it just stopped, and that made it a lot of fun.
I can't imagine braking or racing in an era where like the brakes were like a limiting factor of
That's
the car.
one. That's kind of what that one that just pulled up from
Oh,
Miss Jackie.
Miss
That's more
Jackie,
what
yeah.
mine looked like. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That one's
So I'm sorry.
autocrossing.
What were you? So what were you gonna say, DJ?
Yeah, I can't imagine racing in an era where the brakes are like a limiting resource, because I feel like I've never tracked a car unless I was tracking a car on like known not great brake pads, where the brakes were like a limiting factor, because like there's just things that solve that. Like you could just spend money or get different parts or just even like create some ducting or whatever, and now the brakes are going to be exactly the same for however many laps you're going to do, right? But back in the day, racing, like the brakes were a limited resource on the car. You couldn't just
Oh yeah.
you couldn't just drive it. You would lose them eventually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that car had no power, and the 2 times I raced it at Road America, by the end of the race, I was having brake fade. Because you're so hard in the brakes at Road America. And I
Yeah.
remember, this would have been 20 years ago now, maybe. Bill Auberland got offered the opportunity to drive Bruce McLaren's M8D, the McLaren M8D, I think it was, in the Big July historic race that's happening this weekend, actually. And he just, it was like a 10-lap race, and he just went like snot for 7 laps. I mean, was gone. And then the last 3 laps was kind of crawling around the track, and I talked to him afterwards, and he said, "Oh yeah, I had no brakes, none."
That would be scary in something like
So,
that.
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
for those not
That's-
watching the video, it's like one of those
Can-Am car.
Yeah, it's like what is that, like early 90s like prototype looking things?
Oh my god.
Well,
Come
that's
on.
what it's looking like, but that would have been 71, probably.
71? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell that I've really never watched racing before?
Those things, the original Can-Am, for anybody not familiar with it, and that's a later version. When they started in 1966, it was a lot simpler still. But basically the rules said you had to have this safety stuff and 2 seats. I mean, that was about it. And like that car had a 494 cubic inch V8 in the back.
Somewhere. It's a
Uh,
very
I like
tiny
the
car.
number of seats.
And you
being
can see the
specified.
injector stacks. They're covered in that one, but they'd have these massive injector stacks coming out, and just making and the tires were almost 2 feet wide in the back. They were just monsters, right? And
Yeah.
it was incredibly exciting and powerful. Unfortunately, the McLarens were head and shoulders above everybody else, so it was rare when somebody else would win. But you really didn't care, because when they go by you, they would shake you to your soul. And and back then, Christ, they'd have fields of 30, 40 of those.
It's unbelievable to me. Yeah.
Yeah. You look at some of the pictures of the Can-Am field at Road America, say, and the size of the fields were immense. And every one of those cars was 200-mile-an-hour capable back then. Just unbelievable.
From some garage.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah. Look at those rears. Look at the size of those rear tires.
Whoa. Yo, Miss Jackie's killing it with the pictures. Whoa, is that real? No,
Yeah,
that's
this is great.
like a Lego or something, but
Yeah, but it gives you the idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild. I
Yeah.
like how there's
Yeah.
quote unquote 2 seats in it.
Yeah.
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 What
You
what a
put
Yeah.
strange thing to
you put like a
mandate.
quarter of a person in that other seat. Like you're
Yeah.
not fitting a
Pretty
whole
much.
human in it.
Pretty much. And the other thing, you know, if you ever looked into the cockpit of those things, it was like an aluminum shell with a little padding in it. And
Yeah.
that's it. You
And that's
know,
it. Yeah.
and you know, when things went wrong, it was big and it was ugly here. And then you can see Trevor from What Are You Slacking just, you know, jumped in there. It was the 917 KL that Porsche and Penske brought in that ended up, you know, because they could dial that thing up to like 1400 horsepower and nobody could run with it. And
Yeah.
it was sort of the predecessor. That's a great shot, and this is an historic event. But that second car, that was John Surtees's Lola T70 Spider that won the original Can-Am championship in '66.
I posted a
But yeah,
picture
yeah,
of
that bottom shot. That's a look at the rears in that bottom picture, folks.
yeah, it's like it's like half of the width of the car is just the rear tires.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they had to have that because they didn't have much downforce. You know, the wings and stuff back then were not that effective. They needed that to just not spin the tires in every freaking gear.
I wonder what one of those
They're
would
so
drive
powerful.
like. They probably don't drive great.
No, they're probably
Not
bad.
compared to modern stuff, no.
But this is
Not at
this is
all.
kind of a perfect segue because we have a series of like listener questions that we wanted to ask,
Sure.
and there's a bunch of them that fall into like the what's your favorite category. So we're gonna
Yeah.
do like a what's your favorite with Greg Creamer.
But first,
fir-
I just saw Lena jump in with more bias ply. Damn straight, girl.
I love
Slip
bias
angle.
plies.
Slip
Oh my
angles.
God.
That's what made racing exciting.
Anytime I've gotten
right,
to drive
if
on
you're-
bias plies, it was like, oh, this is it.
Mhm.
Yes, if you have never driven on bias plies and you get the chance, I don't care what the car is, I don't care where you are at, take the chance and just try to feel it out and experience what it's like because it's so different. It's so bizarre.
I want to sign
It's
a
so-
waiver and then drive to work on bias plies. Like I just want those to be my daily tires.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. In my opinion, you know, I announced Trans Am. Sorry to delay your
No,
thing
you're
here,
fine.
Tom, but
Go
when
for
I
it.
was announcing Trans Am from my first year was '89 through like '94. Uh, to me, the moment when Trans Am started to die was the moment they went from the bias ply BF Goodrich tires to the radials. Because up until that point, the slip angles in those things were spectacular. And these, you know, cars, 10 cars that go through turn one at Road America, every one of them sideways
Yeah.
and in a pack. It was incredible. And it was visually, it was just ridiculous. Then the radials came in and the slip angle started to go, and it just wasn't as fun anymore.
Well, that was kind of my point before about the the spectacle of motorsports is kind of the
Yeah.
selling point at this point, and drifting and stadium trucks and rally and all that is way easier to sell than the types of motorsports we love, where fastest is usually smoothest and most gripped up, which is the hardest to see.
Yeah.
Which means you need to get closer, you need to understand the detail, you need to get really granular to make motorsports super exciting, or you
Yep.
just jump something off of something and make fire and smoke and
I
stuff.
might be asking
Well,
the wrong
exactly.
crowd.
Exactly.
I might
But,
be
you
asking.
know, the interest.
Sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, you know, when they started to come out first with the retro Mustang, and then
Yeah.
the Camaro, and then eventually the Challenger. I actually went to some of the motors the head of motorsports at GM and Mopar and all that, and I said, you've got a golden opportunity here with these cars. If you get a rule set somewhere between World Challenge GT and A Sedan, and A Sedan's the closest thing to the original Trans Am we've ever had. If you get a rule set somewhere in there with these cars, and each manufacturer builds 10 of them, and you know hire a few of the great legendary Trans Am drivers and some of the new guns coming up, and you go to Hoosier and you figure out how many tires you need for a season, and say we need you to build this many bias ply tires. I told them, I said, you know, yeah, a TV package and all that, but you would have some of the most spectacular racing going in cars that people can drive on the road, you know.
Yeah.
And it just was, well, it's intriguing, but you know, money and all this. But I just thought they missed a golden opportunity because, man, talk about you know, having some fun. But anyway, I'm sorry, Tom. We'll go ahead.
No, well, I mean, to that point, I think the new Mustang Spec Series that IMSA has,
Mhm.
I've watched the first 4 races. It's not that exciting. And I'm like, they need less grip. Take the grip
Yeah,
away. They have too
yeah,
much grip. They're like stock Mustangs, but they have too much grip.
exactly. Well,
Because
you remember
it's too.
when GTS came into World Challenge,
Yes.
and a lot of it was those Mustangs that came from the original Mustang Challenge out at Salt Lake, and a
Yep.
few other cars. That was some of the best racing going in the country because they were under tired,
Yeah.
and that
Because
was spectacular to watch.
they were all on, what was it, Toyo triple eights,
Yeah, something like that, which
which
were
is,
crap to start
they're a
with,
horrible
and then
tire, but
and
that
then way
was,
too narrow, and then
yeah.
not enough tires. So it
That
was a
sounds great.
joy to watch them run.
Yeah.
It was brilliant fun. So
I
anyway, Tomo,
yeah, I wish they would do that more. Okay, so Greg's favorites.
yeah,
Greg, what is your favorite track to drive that you've driven?
Road America.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, well, it's a toss up because Road Atlanta with the dip would probably take it.
Ooh, I've never
'Cause I
driven
got
the
to
dip
drive
before.
there. I got to drive there a number of times, and that was miraculously fun.
I'm imagining Road Atlanta with a dip. That I mean, so me and Tom did a track bracket, and I think I forget what the runner up was for you, Tom, but Road Atlanta was the runner up. Well, it was the winner if it was for racing. If it was just for lapping, it was NCM. But with the dip,
Yeah, we did we
Yeah.
did a 32 track bracket, and we just like
Mhm.
narrowed them down to what our favorite tracks were, and it came down to NCM Motorsports Park is the best track to lap, and Road Atlanta is the best track to race. I think that's what he and I came up with.
Yeah.
uh,
But
I would agree on the latter for sure.
I
for
agree that Road America is up there though.
Yeah.
yes,
Oh yeah.
definitely up there. It's definitely in my top 5. But for those that don't know, the dip is what used to be after the back straight, and then you'd go up over the hill under the bridge, and then you'd fall down into turn 12. There didn't used to be a 10A, 10B there. If people are going, what's the dip?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
drove Road Atlanta for years before I found out that that wasn't the layout that it's always been. There used to be a far more sketchier, deadlier, more fun layout.
well, and if you've been to Road Atlanta, but you don't know about the dip, if you've ever gone under the tunnel that runs underneath 10A and 10B, the bottom of that tunnel was the bottom of the dip. That's how abrupt and deep that thing was.
That's the
So
mind-blowing part to me is if you so
yeah.
you're coming down the hill after 9, you're aiming towards the breaking point for 10A, and then there's a tunnel underneath it that you can drive down to get to the infield.
Wait,
You
what?
go drive down under that tunnel, that is how much more extreme that elevation already was to create
Yep.
the dip.
Wait a second.
DJ, are you with us? Do you know where that is?
No, I didn't know there was a tunnel underneath 10A and 10B.
Yeah,
Yep.
do you know that big stadium section that's like all concrete stair steps kind of
Yeah.
around that section? You can drive down and go underneath the track there. So let's call it
I
what,
didn't know
12
that.
to 15 feet of earth that the
Wait,
Oh, at
track
least.
lost
so
in
it used
elevation.
it
Yeah.
used to go even
Well, more than
farther
that.
down?
Yeah, more than that. I bet you that was a 20, 25 foot. Yeah, you'd
Yeah.
come over 9, you do that little run over 9, and then the earth would fall away. And you drop down, and it wasn't like it was you go down and then a nice easy up. It was you go down massive compression because you'd literally come right back up again. And then so you're literally climbing, I don't know, like this, heading
Yeah.
up into 11 under the bridge. And when you get to the bridge, and if you drive under that now, on the inside of the bridge abutment, there's a raised, like a curb. It's this raised little platform, right? And if you didn't have your right front tire on that going through there, which meant you were probably a foot from that concrete abutment, you weren't going through there fast. I mean, it talk about separating the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, that's
There's an there's a really incredible YouTube channel that has a bunch of old SCCA archive videos on it called SCCA Old Guy Yeah. If you want to look that up, listener.
I
Um,
love it.
okay,
Well,
so your
somebody
favorite
there
track.
has the gravity cabbie, which is what it used to be called. And yeah, right. If you look here with where Miss Jackie is, where her finger arrow is, that's that tunnel underneath the track, DJ.
Yeah.
That's where that would be.
uh
Uh,
yeah,
And I'll tell you,
I
coming
figured
over
where it
9 and
was.
falling into that. First time I did that, I was getting a lap with back in the old Bridgestone Supercar Series era, which would have been late 90s. And I was driving with Hurley Haywood, or he was driving, and I was on a media lap. And of course, those guys, they'd always volunteer for media labs. Then the whole time, they'd never talk to the
Oh
media.
yeah,
The whole time they're on the radio going, I think, yeah, I just tried this. And I think if we make this setup change.
for
And,
sure.
but the Bridgestone supercars were still technically street cars. So they had speedometers, right? And I glanced over because when we fell off the earth down into 10, as we hit that compression, I glanced over and we were at 150 miles an hour.
I feel
And
like
it
I
just
missed out.
exploded and then just shot up the hill. And of course, you're climbing like this, so you could brake impossibly late. And I'm waiting for him to brake, and I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, we're going to go hit that bridge abutment from the underside. We're going to hit the bridge,
You're like, go
Yeah,
flying.
right.
because we're waiting, and then he hits the brakes, and it just slows, and he turns in, and it was like unbelievable,
I feel like
unbelievable.
I missed out on an experience that other people got to have with the gravity cannon version of Road Atlanta. I need somebody that is really good at like making tracks in like Assetto Corsa or something to make it so I can at least drive it in a sim. That's got to exist,
That
right?
has to exist. That has to exist for sure.
Somewhere you would think, yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is
Um,
that now it can't be scanned, but it had to exist on some of the older sims where you could, certainly the other technologies there, AI or whatever, to say, here's what it was in this old game, bring it up to date.
that's where I wish
Anyway,
iRacing would put its evils to good use because they have all this scanning technology. Let's create the old Road Atlanta instead of create some new GT3 car that I don't forget to drive. You know what I'm
I'm
talking
with
about,
you.
DJ?
Hey, the
I like
Mustang
it.
the
Anyway,
Mustang makes
Gre-
good noises.
it's good. Yeah. Greg, what is your favorite event to attend? Event.
Lamar,
Yeah.
not even
Why?
close.
Why?
It's Mecca. It's Mecca. The energy at Lamar is just off the hook. It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's the Mecca of sports car racing, and when you're there, you feel it. You know, and when you get within a half hour of the start of the race, and at a certain level, it almost feels like you're at a World Cup match because the air horns are going and the crowds are singing those chants that they do, for their country. And then you walk through the tribune and you look, and the cars are lined up echelon style, draped in the flags of their whoever their entrant is. It's just a whole different level of stuff. The track is absolutely incredible. It's insane. Public roads, you could drive on it. Um, in the mornings, on even Wednesday and Thursday when they have qualifying. Now the parts that are permanent racetrack you can't, but they're
Sure.
there, and it's just there's an energy there that it's just, and you get over a quarter of a million people come out for
I think I can sort of relate to what that must be like because I've only been to one Indy 500, but it was the 100th Indy 500,
it.
and my little Honda Fit was on display in the
Aw,
corral with Honda, the
so
red one that you
cute.
commentated, Greg.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I was there because my car's
The
on display and
championship
stuff.
winning car, yeah.
Amen. Yeah,
And
and
now it's a
I
little
hadn't even
cube
raced
of
it yet.
metal.
Yeah, I hope not, but you're probably right. But being like that lead up into the
Yeah.
race, and I vividly remember. So there's all this pomp and circumstance, and they flew the bald eagle from the top of the grandstands at turn one down to the grid, and but then they panned to some driver in his car. They're already in the car, and it was just like staring daggers of focus, and you get this whole uh, juxtaposition of this pomp and circumstance and this grandeur of the jets
Hmm.
flying over and the bald eagle flying and the people losing their minds, and then like the drivers are so locked in because this is what they've been prepping for.
Right.
I imagine Lamar is probably more intense than that. That with
Um.
the
Yeah.
number of people and the international and the scale and all, like it has to be the coolest. So I hope I get to.
Well, it is, and the other aspect of it is, also there's this feeling that you don't get at a lot of tracks anymore because, there's the permanent sections which are relatively safe these days, but the parts that are still just public road, that they run on. I went out and I did a piece, and it was after it, and I'm trying to remember the years, but if you remember, there was an incredible piece of video at Monza where the prototypes of that era were racing, and Alan McNish was turning into that first chicane, and two guys hit behind him, and the guy took off,
Oh yeah.
and he sliced between
Mhm.
them like that.
Yep, I remember.
And I did a piece out as you were approaching the Mulsanne Bend, and I did a piece on the track where we played that video, and I said, "Now, if that happens here, look where that car ends up." And there was guardrail, a few feet in the side of a house. And that
Damn.
car would have well cleared the guardrail and the little bit of fencing. And so there's this element at Le Mans still that on those sections, the old sections of the track, that you're still driving on like a spa and back in the day where
Yeah.
there's if it goes, it's going to be big.
Yeah.
And remember, every bit of that also has crown in the road. So as you're driving at 220 miles an hour or whatever, the car's just hunting all the time. It's
Yeah.
just, there's that feeling, before it starts of, oh my God, this is for real, folks. And then at night in the rain, that kind of thing. It's in a way, it's really indescribable. You know,
Sure. Favorite event to commentate?
Runoffs.
That's your favorite out of all of them?
Really?
All
Oh
the
yeah,
things.
people ask me all the time. I go, it's my second favorite race of the year to announce. When I was doing Le Mans, I'd say it's my second favorite race
Because
or
you're
event
coworkers,
to
right?
announce. Oh, of course, I have the most fun there and
G-
everything.
because he
Gee,
gets to
folks, can
announce
you
with Tom
imagine who works with
O'Gorman.
me there? Um, no, because what I like about that event is, and this is a whole other discussion topic, but I'm an old school guy, right? And one, I just love the camaraderie in the paddock. And you wander around, and you see everybody sitting there, and they've just been racing against somebody hard, and now they're having brats and burgers together, and everything. I just love just the energy of the event. But most of the races there are not big horsepower, which I don't mind, or aero. And I hate aero. I hate it with a passion.
Tom does
And
too.
and and at the runoffs, most of the classes don't have aero. It's mechanical grip and the driver getting it done. And I
Yeah.
relish that. I cherish it. I just love it.
That made me think of a question actually. So I relate to this. Both of us relate to. I think most of the listeners relate to this. We come from a grassroots passion and
Hmm.
enthusiast driven kind of motivation for being in motorsport.
Right,
Whether we're
right.
hobbyists, whether we're career people because we love it, whatever. Did you have any? So you started with the hobbyist stuff,
Right.
grassroots, amateur, and you moved into professional through your career. What were there any challenges in transitioning from one to the other mindset wise, or starting to learn? Like I still find the pro racing um, realm to be like a little
Yeah.
overwhelming. Did you have any struggles with that? Were there any like learning curves with, oh, I need to treat it in this box or keep it here because this is going to
Yeah.
make sure that I keep my fun and my passion for it or something?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing to me was, to me, there are two sectors to announcing an event, right? There's
Yeah.
the actual once the green flag drops, that part of it, and then there's all the stuff in between. And at a club race or whatever, you could be a lot more casual with all the in between stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't mean I don't mean disrespectful or disregarding. I just mean you can have more fun with it in a way. You can do stuff. When I got into my first bit of calling pro racing, the stuff in between became really important because that's a lot of the promotional stuff,
Oh yeah,
and
the business part
you've
of
got to be
business
hitting
racing.
that because that's where the funding comes from, right? To me, the minute the green flag dropped, to me, there's no difference. And I think Tomo, you've sat beside me in the booth at the runoffs, and I'm guessing you've listened to me announce some pro stuff. And I don't think I'm any less into it at the runoffs than I am in the pro stuff. Because to me, that's it. That's the moment. It's the stuff in between that you just have to take a little bit more seriously when you're doing something on the pro end. I just got to, really be sharp with that.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's where there's a lot of formatted stuff which you got to hit, which we talked about before.
Sure.
you've already said this person's name, but I'm gonna butcher it just for the comedic effect. The Watka Yaska Lakin. Is that?
Oh, what do you slack? What do you slack?
Oh my God, is that what that ends up being?
Yep. Yep.
What are you slacking?
What do you?
Yeah.
Okay, so what?
They are the ultimate race fans.
All right,
And
there's
you
what are
go
you
to
slacking, and then whatever the
yeah.
frick I said. So, uh, he
Well,
said,
yours could have was just a foreign race car driver. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a perfect moment actually earlier in the podcast. You didn't even know it was happening, Greg, but you taught DJ how to say Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve, which I just
Oh.
butchered as well. So you're gonna teach DJ's gonna go study that moment and he's gonna learn how to
no,
say that
it's
circuit's name.
still Gills if I'm gonna say it, or if I have to say the second part, it's Villanueve. So that's what I'm sticking to.
Well, I'll tell you, not even close. But that's right.
How
Good
dare you?
try. Good try, bud.
There you
go. So what are you slacking in the chat? Said he wants to hear your first race story.
I wonder if he's talking about my first drive.
Said
Oh,
ask Greg about his first race. Great story.
Oh,
I
great.
know,
There it
I
is.
know, I know. God, this is incredibly embarrassing.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Well, all right. I'm out there in my little Toyota Starlet. I had done a driver's school at the Road Atlanta because for many years down there I announced the runoffs. And after doing it a few years, they asked me if I'd be willing to host the banquet, the awards banquet. And they said instead of paying you, which we can do, but we can give you something that's worth a hell of a lot more money than the banquet if you'd be so inclined as a trade-off or a trade-out. And I said, what's that? And they said, a 4-day racing school. Because then, Road Atlanta had their own driving school, racing school. So that was a no-brainer. And so I had done a school. And then a month later was the Memorial Day weekend race at Brainerd. And it was a regional. And the Friday before, they had a driver's school. And, the rules are if you've already completed an accredited school and you complete the second one, then you can race. So I did the second school and I raced and I did okay. I qualified like third in class and I was pretty pumped about that. And, the pre-race, geez, I got a piss thing.
Yeah,
Well, I had to take it to another level, if you know what I'm getting at.
sure.
I already
And
see where
I
the
get
story's
out,
going.
yeah, and I get out of the Porta-John and my paddock is empty where I was paddocked, except for my car. And while I was in there, the call to grid came and they had all taken off. So I come flying out of there and go, oh my God. And I get in the car and I hustle over and I'm pulling into where I was like 30 feet from making it out, where even though I wasn't in line, they would have let me take my spot. And the one thing I had forgot to put on were my gloves. So they
Oh
stopped me.
no.
And as I'm putting on my gloves, the last car went out. And once that happened, I now had to go to the back of the field. So that was the for for that one personal bodily need, I ended up giving up. And that there were like 35 cars in the field, and I'd qualify like 22nd in the group, and I had to go all the way to the back.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, but the funny part of it was I was so far behind now the pace lap. And this is at Brainerd on the old 3-mile track, not the joke of a track they have there now, but the old 3-mile track. And so I took off and I'm trying to catch him. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that maybe don't catch him too quick, because if you time this right, you could have nice warm tires. And so I was hustling and I got to where I could see him and I closed. And I came out of 9. And as I came out of turn 10, I was right coming up on the back of the field. And I'm sitting there and I'm gaining and I'm closing because I'm just really rolling speed here. And right as I thought, I'm going to have to lift, I see the green flag fly. And I literally just went poof. And I was going so fast
Tom
that
has
I
done this on
shot by all
iRacing.
these people. And by the time I got to turn 3 at Brainerd, I was one spot behind where I'd qualified.
Hey, the universe put it into play.
So that was fun. And then on the second lap of the race, just to kind of make it fun, I set my fastest lap, which I found out later was a new track record in the class. And I was closing on the leader at that point. And then one of those headers we just had to put on one of the header bolts started to spin off, and I started, and like I said, I had 1.3 liters, and I started losing power on that track, and I was pretty much cooked. But it was a crazy experience, and afterwards, when the thing came up and they said, I was looking at the sheet and it said track records, and mine came up, and I was like, seriously? But
On lap
apparently,
1? How did you do that?
no, it was lap 2.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So that was pretty crazy.
Tom's
That
done the
is,
same thing in iRacing where he gets a running start on everyone and looks totally not you should be ashamed, Tom.
never. I would never.
One time we were doing a 24-hour race, Greg, and
Yeah.
I forgot about this.
and so there's like 3 classes. You got like the prototype class, and there's like the slower prototype class, and then we were GT3. Or no, it was this is back when they had the GTE or the GTLM cars in iRacing, and then you had the prototype,
Yeah.
and we were driving GT3. And Tom's hanging back because it's kind of like you separate the packs a little bit. It's just kind of like iRacing, like culture.
Right.
And Tom goes early, so he has his advantage of getting pole position. And he's going. The green flag hasn't went yet. Nobody else is going. He starts catching the other classes. Then it turns green. He passes everyone, even the faster car classes. It is chaos behind him. We ended up winning that race.
Oh,
It was 24-hour
fun
race,
is
and that's how
that?
it started. But yeah,
See, here's the thing though. There's iRacing, the rules are made up and the points don't matter as far as I'm concerned. So like if you're not gonna put some sort of parameter in place where I can't just go whenever I want, I'm gonna go whenever I want.
you're a race driver.
dude, I
I
just
feel like
remember.
Greg has seen me in my worst and my best because he's seen me be a race car driver and he's seen me be myself outside of the race car. And
it
that's
was
the
me,
best and worst
Tom.
versions of myself.
It was me, Tom, and Eric Catil, and me and Eric were just holding our breath for like the whole first lap. So it was a minute and 42 seconds of us holding our breath. So
Oh my God, how fun!
that was really fun.
God.
You gotta love those minutes. And
Yeah.
Tom, did you put up the race trucks at Brainerd?
I
Was that you?
did. Yes. Have
Yeah,
you
those things were just nuts, man.
were you commentating that? Were you working that?
87 at Brainerd, I very well may have been for the track. Wouldn't
So
have
this
been
is a link.
on TV.
Yeah,
yeah.
this is the link I put in the live chat for the live audience. But if you're listening in the normal episode, if you look up 1987 SCCA Coors race trucks at Brainerd, it's a 45-minute video that's like a multi-race highlight reel of this professional race series that were all the mini trucks from the 80s that were like 4-cylinder Jeeps and Celines and Nissans and Mazdas and all this. And because Brainerd at the time it's like a 1 point some mile front straight, including the two first, turns 1 and
Yeah.
2.
Right. Well, the front straight before turn 1 was 5,000 feet, and then
Okay.
turn 1 is high bank, virtually flat in most cars, and turn 2 is the same radius as 1, but just flat.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have vehicles with a ton of power, you were flat from the exit of 10 all the way to the entrance of 3. Yeah.
Yes. So it was basically the B spec of the time, and it's all draft battles, and it's all hell breaks loose, and the rest of the lap takes place, and they kind of race each other, but then the whole field comes back together. It's spectacular. I found it on YouTube years ago, and I remember just watching it enthralled the entire time. So
Why did this?
I kind of wondered if you had yeah, it's the weirdest thing, right?
Who was like, you know what we need to raise? A Ford Ranger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody.
But and I'll tell you what, it was some of the most fun racing to watch and call because they were aerodynamic bricks. And so the draft was just insane. It was race trucks for me where the boom was born, Tomo.
Really?
At Road Atlanta, Trans Am weekend, I don't know, early 90s. And I was up on a lift. If you drew a line between turn 5 and turn 8 at Road Atlanta, there's that spectator hill.
Yep.
And they had me up on a scissor lift so I could see most of the track. And I was calling that race. And these guys, they would come out of turn 7, and the amount of draft was so powerful that when they would hit for the bump draft, I mean, it was a solid whack, right? And I started to notice that. So as I'm calling, and like I said, I'm trying for everybody in the front straight that can't see this to give them as much of a visual as I could. And so I go, all right, Cunningham leading, but here comes Archer. He's closing. Wait for it. Boom! And I mean, it was just that violent. And you'd see the truck just leap, when he got hit. And it was intense. And I mean, talk about rubbing. And at one race, I think it was the old St. Pete Street Course race. Steve Saleen, it was one of the great calls from a corner network, and I was laughing because I was calling the same thing, but it was a rolled and continued. And Saleen, they
Wait,
just
wait, wait,
split.
wait,
Wait, hold on. What does that
Explain
mean?
explain that in corner worker language for the listeners who have never worked a corner.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the weirdest thing because if you're seeing that, you go, yeah, it's so and so, control, this is corner, whatever. We were yellow, now back to green. Race truck number 19 rolled and continued, and
Oh,
literally
like
they
literally
came
end over
together,
end.
and he flipped like 3 times, ended on his wheels. It was still running. The hood wasn't up, and I heard him chunking into gear and just took off. They were bricks, man. But it was some fun racing.
That's uh I wonder, like, I can't even
Yeah.
okay, I can put myself in these guys' shoes a little bit because I was like, my racing career in 2013, what do I or 14, what do I do? I could do Spec Miata, I could do Spec Racer Ford, or I could do B Spec. This B Spec thing seems kind of cool. So rewinding to 1985 or 6 or whatever, and it's like, okay, I could do this, Spec Renault, and then I could be, I could try to get into this, or I could race
I could
trucks.
race a Jeep pickup truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all did. They all did.
But yeah. Well, and the funny thing was the Archers, they started in ice racing, right? And
Yeah.
they showed up at the runoffs in the Renault. I remember the Renault Le Cars, and won their class, and they ended up eventually getting the nod with Mopar, and were able to put together this truck deal. Eventually, they ended up driving Dodge, the Dodges and Trans Am. But it all
Yeah.
started, I mean that. But look at the level of sponsorship on those things.
I know.
You
That's
know,
what I
Sure.
was gonna point out. Like we have some pictures of
Yeah.
it in the chat, and like there's a lot of stickers on these cars. You got Goodyear, got some beer, got beer on that truck. Like there's
You bet.
yeah, there's some money behind this Jeep pickup truck, which you probably can't find a single one of those on the road ever again. They're probably all dead. I thought that's where the boom came from, is because they were racing Jeeps.
Oh, nice. Oh, and he's got the rim shot queued up too. That's impressive.
I was waiting for a
That's
while to do
impressive.
that one.
Tomo, 50,000 unemployed comedians in this world, and I got to be on a show with DJ.
And
Um,
welcome to this highly professional podcast. Yeah.
But the funny thing, and there was Shell Zone and Free Zone, and I mean all of these things that these automakers that had the trucks also had these aftermarket products. So they just kind of threw everything at it for a while. And believe it or not, there's still one of those trucks. It's a Nissan that races in Atlanta region in their enduros.
In the
Guy still comes out and runs them.
I wonder if
yeah,
there's
the endurance, the ECR, Endurance Championship. What
Yeah,
does ECR stand
Endurance
for?
Championship Racing.
That's a dumb name.
But that's what it is. But
Yes. Yeah, I love seeing that truck go by. Yes, that's fun.
that's pretty
I
cool.
was like, wait, ECR can't stand for that. That would be a dumb name, but sure enough,
Yeah.
there we are.
Is that the only truck that you know of, Greg, that still exists?
Well, it's the only one that I've seen. I would think there might be a few
But like
that would
they're
show
like
up
sitting around in like garages and stuff. Yeah.
or in historic racing, maybe. Somebody
Oh
might have
yeah,
one,
yeah,
but,
maybe.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Although Historics is mostly like World Challenge and Spec Me Out of cars now.
Oh, that's true.
Okay, last listener question, combo question. Favorite race that you have sorry, are there races? Favorite race that you would love to spectate or commentate that you have not watched yet or commentated yet, let's say. And what is your favorite race series of all time? As you, Greg, the person.
Oy. God, favorite a race that I would love to do that I have. I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool to do Indy, the 500 once. I've never announced it. I've worked it, but I've never been there. But I think Monaco.
Ooh.
Yeah, I
To
think
to
I
to
think
work or to be
to
to?
announce to announce.
To work. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely amazing. At the end to be talking about the winner going up and getting the trophy from Prince Rainier and all that. I think that or Spa. I mean,
You seem
um,
drawn to motorsports events that have like a history behind them.
well, it's I mean, you think where I started with it with the old Nordschleife and the Nurburgring. It's just the history of the sport, and that's something that kind of confounds me and upsets me right now. Is I'd love nothing more than to be traveling with HSR and announcing it because so many of those cars were cars that got me
Yeah.
riled up and
Yeah.
into it. And I'd love to be calling that stuff. So, but the other one that would be fun. I don't know that I'd want to announce it, but it'd be fun to go and watch it just because of what the venue. Well, here means to me.
Nur-
Okay.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
that's wait,
I
what was
didn't
Yeah,
know
that?
you had
Was
that.
that
Greg just
yeah,
Nurburgring?
flashed his Nurburgring tattoo.
yeah, the Nurburgring. I'd love to attend the 24 hours of the ring.
The things you
I
learned
think
on the
that would
Lizard
be
Brains
Okay.
podcast. Greg Kramer has a Nordschleife tattoo.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
So
That that's
yeah,
incredible. Okay, so he wants
that's
to go
that's where
to
it started.
Nurburgring and commentate Monaco.
Yeah, I think those would be pretty amazing. Pretty
Well,
amazing to be a part
listeners,
of.
let's get to work on making that happen. We all
Yep.
have lots of strings we can pull. We have a lot of people we know,
Yep.
and I
Just
think we can make this happen.
yeah, let's make it happen, guys. Merch. We sell it. We need to
You
sell
didn't
like
just roll your eyes, did you?
we need to
Huh?
sell like
No,
20,000 stickers, and we're all going to Nordschleife and we're bringing Greg.
That's right. So, Greg, we do our podcast requests like this in
Mhm.
terms of the Lizard Brains podcast merch, which, by the way, for the next 3 days is on sale for 20% off on our storefront. But so like DJ needed a new air conditioning unit, which was a certain number of stickers.
It
So
was
our listeners just had to
50
go buy that number of stickers.
5,200 stickers to be
nice.
exact.
Yeah, and
Nice.
it works every time. Let me
I
tell you.
love
It
it.
works every time.
I love it. I love it.
The stickers are $2 each, and we make $1 off of each of them. So that's why it's literally just a currency for us.
Oh, that's too fun. That's too
Miss
fun.
Jackie,
Amazing.
we love you. She posted the link in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there it is. All right,
our link master.
I'll have to check that out. But
That's amazing.
yeah, there's yeah, those would be two great events, obviously, to be involved in. And I got to tell you, what I ended up getting this year has been really weirdly amazing. This new E1, I don't know if anybody's been able to see it, but this E1, it's the world's first electric powerboat racing series.
Interesting.
Oh,
And
I saw you post about this. Yeah.
yeah, and FIA is the world championship sanctioning body for at world championship level for car racing. Well, UIM is the marine version of that, and this brand new series which has these electric powered power boats, but they go up on foils, hydrofoils, and so other than sailing, which uses foils, no other powerboat racing does, and this one does. They're electric powered, and somehow, and it's the same guy that created Formula E and Extreme E are behind it, and somehow they convinced UIM in its first year to make it a full world championship, and it's an international series. First race was in Jeddah. Second race was in Venice.
Where would we check
Third
it
race
out?
was Puerto Banús. Well, the shows there live on the event weekends on CBS Sports Network, but you can go to YouTube and just search E1 series, and so please, it'd be great to subscribe, but you don't have to. But they have like all of the semifinals, the place race, and the finals from Puerto Banús are there on their channel there, and it's just really cool. And to be in, I mean, it's a full world championship, and to be in on the bottom rung of that and be a part of it. And I just got recommended for it. Did an interview. They said come do the first one and everything. But here's the thing: all of these marvelous venues around the world, and I have to fly to Europe, but I just go to a studio in London. So
That's great.
it's like a normal 4 day, you know, event for me, just with much longer flights.
Sure.
But calling the racing is just crazy fun.
I feel like there's an episode 2 of this where you're going to join us again soon, and we're going to talk about the way that commentary works, where you don't get to pick the sport all the time, and you're going to talk about the sports that you've commentated that are not motorsports. And like, I feel like that has to be a whole other
Yeah.
can of worms that we didn't even touch, right?
Yeah. Well, I haven't announced a lot of things that aren't motorsports. I mean, back when I was doing my
Well,
little
let's say
show,
like
yeah,
not road racing, because you've done
Oh,
snowmobiles
okay.
and now
Yeah, I
you're
was
doing
gonna.
e-boats
I'm
and
like,
all
I'm
this
pretty
stuff.
sure
Like,
I've
that's
heard your
wild.
voice commentating snowmobiles before that I've like came across in like Speed Vision,
Oh,
like when I was a
for
child.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. That was oh yeah. That's actually how I started was the snowmobile racing.
Snowmobiles? No way.
Yeah.
Okay, because I
Yep.
remember watching it, and all right, I know I have a hard cutoff in 18 minutes because I'm coaching at 9, but um, there, I think part of what makes you so fun to watch whatever race that you're doing, Greg, is that like, and you've already said it a couple times in this podcast, you're full in. Like you are the most excited person in the room, and you're bringing everyone with you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always been like that, and I just and like I said, and I think it really springs from the fact that I always wanted to be a race car driver and I couldn't. And I went through that period of how can I make a career out of this? And when I had that moment announcing that snowmobile race, um, and I realized, oh my God, I love this. And it was something I could do that kept me in the motorsports world that I loved. And I just was so excited about being able to do it. And that, the travel nowadays, all of that, stuff gets a little bit of a stretch. But when I get to where I'm going, and I love what I do, and it's just and I get pumped up. I just, when that green flag drops, I mean, I don't care if it's a snowmobile race, motorcycles, whatever, it's a race. And I just get into it. I just love it.
So the takeaway from the podcast was that uh, the SCCA runoffs is more fun than snowmobile racing. That's
Well,
what you said.
it's certainly a lot warmer.
Right.
That is true.
And snowmobile racing,
It's dangerous, dude.
SCCA runoffs are great, but you don't see many cars in the SCCA runoffs clearing triple jumps
Nope.
and doing 100-foot gap jumps.
And how much
and
how
that
much
kind
do
of
those
stuff.
sleds weigh? They're like what, like 800 pounds? Like they're not light.
No, they're not. Yeah, they're heavy, and they got a 3-point stance. And when those riders are flying them like a motocross bike, it's incredible what they can do on them.
Yeah.
It's and it's
Do they
so
still
I
do
mean,
that?
no, I haven't done snowmobile racing for a while.
Do people
If
still
somebody
race them
asked,
like that
I'd love
though?
to.
Do
Oh
people
yeah,
still
oh
race them
yeah,
like motocross?
yep,
Oh, for
yep,
sure.
Oh
yeah.
my
They do
goodness.
snowcross still, and
All right.
and yeah, it isn't as big as it used to be back when they had the World Snowmobile Association
So
was
there's a
really
whole
trying to
nother
make it
tier of
big.
crazy. You got the people who race motorcycles on like a road course, and then you got like the people who are racing snowmobiles. Like it's just like you just dive into like this pit of like crazy motorsports people,
Yeah,
and like us like road course driving in caged cars are at like the top of like the
yeah.
we're the most sane, and then it just gets worse from there.
Yeah. Well, motorcycle road racers, because the last 2 years I did Moto America, and watching what they do, I've often said, the top level car drivers are wired differently, but motorcycle racers are gladiators,
Yeah,
and it's just insane. I mean, Moto America was the first event to go to Road America after it was repaved. And on that track in the superbike class, there were 3 different spots on the track where they were up over 190 miles an hour on a bike.
that's pretty wild, dude. It's so crazy,
And
like how
yeah,
they're like the front and the rear tire are like gliding underneath them, and they're like balancing it on this like point, like like we've driven cars and like the way it moves around underneath us. They're doing that on 2 wheels. Like it's so. I bet if you got competent at it and you could just like churn laps, it's probably like very rewarding. But to get to that point and not have a limp or like a metal leg or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
like is got to be like that's its own achievement, right?
Oh, well, I think you're right. To get there is terrifying. Once you're there,
It's probably just
it's
great.
rewarding for sure. But
Yeah.
and then to put it all even more into perspective MotoGP, I think it was last year at Mugello, which is the longest front straight in the deal. And I don't remember what rider it was, but somebody just set the fastest motorcycle trap speed in Moto America history at the end of the straight. It was like 228 miles an hour.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it is on a bike,
It's
So yeah, that's just exactly, Tom. That's just mind bending.
yeah.
You know, it really
No,
is. So,
no, thank you. No, thank you.
oh, Miss Jackie, that is it. Yep, that's
Yep,
snowcross.
you
We
can
got some
actually
snowmobiles
you can
jumping.
actually see Greg in that picture. He's the one on the ground. He's the only one that
Yeah.
is a sane human.
I'm in the corner cowering.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You can
You
see
know,
him in
yeah,
the snowmobile in the background. He's got like a boom arm like all hooked up. It's like got a microphone on it. He's
yeah.
commentating it
No,
from fourth place.
actually, I commentated from as far away as I possibly could.
Preferably Florida, huh? Right.
Well, funny
That's
thing, I
amazing.
ended up doing the television shows for these were post produced, where they edit the show together, and then the last thing is we put the voice on it.
Yeah.
And the guy that I announced with on ESPN and then on Speed Vision was Paul Page, who had a condo down in Fort Myers Beach in the winter. So it was the goofiest thing, because I'd announce a race, and then 2 weeks later I'd fly down midweek, and we'd be sitting in a studio, and I'd be talking about it's 20 below here in Valcourt, Quebec, and I'd be doing that, and I felt like it was okay for me to do it because I'd actually been there when it was 20 below in Valcourt,
Sure.
doing my track stuff and my announcing. But when we were doing that, we'd be sitting in t-shirts and shorts and flip flops, because as soon as we were done, we were going to go hit the beach. So
Yeah.
there was some
The
pretty
magic of television.
weird moments over the years. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But great fun.
All right, Greg, we gotta wrap up the podcast, but I want to do some rapid fire questions just so we can get through them.
Oh, what are we doing? What are we doing?
I'm just the last couple questions that we have. All right, what's something a
We
driver
did
can
those.
do? No, you didn't. You didn't ask
We
this
did
question.
those.
You asked this
I
question.
100% asked that question. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Greg,
We're
stop
good.
me if you've heard this one before. What is something a driver can do to make themselves stand out?
Oh, that's a good one. We didn't ask that one. I thought you were going to say,
I was
what
gonna
say,
can
we
you learn
didn't.
from the outside?
Well, there are the obvious things. Don't be a dick. But really is be genuine. I mean, be fast. I mean,
Ah,
obviously,
come on, guys,
you've
it's
got to be
simple.
quick. You've got to be quick to stand out, because there's lots of drivers out there, lots of wannabes. But if you're fast and you're humble and genuinely humble, a classic example of that, Jake Gagne, who's the top guy in Moto America. He's won 3 straight Superbike championships. You would when you talk to him, you would never have a clue that he was a 3-time champion and one of the winningest drivers over the past decade. He's just a genuinely nice guy, and you compliment him, and he takes it to heart. He's just a genuinely nice guy, and to me, those are the drivers or riders or whatever, that really stand out, because they know they're good. They have to know that to be that good, but they don't wear it as on their sleeve and brag about it. They're just genuine. They love what they're doing, and they're the ones that generally give the best interview as well.
Okay, you did that one. Tom, you didn't ask this one either. All right, I guess we only had 2 rapid fire questions. This is the last one. Was there a
Well,
moment?
this one comes
Go ahead,
real
Tom.
quick. This was a listener question for Randy Popes 2 weeks ago. And I
Okay.
liked it, so I wanted to write it down for you as well.
Okay.
So, was there a moment when you realized that you made it?
Absolutely. And it gets to me still. My first Le Mans, 1998. And keep in mind, when I had grown up and was loving racing, most of the racing you could see was on Wide World of Sports when they do those little segments. And when it came to car racing, it was usually one of the guys was Sam Posey. And if you remembered back in that era, I don't know how many have seen it, but he'd have the big headset on and holding the microphone with whatever the mic flag, and he'd be, and Jim Squire would say, "All right, and now for a look at what happened, at the Monaco Grand Prix. Let's check in with Sam Posey," and Sam would go, "Hi, everybody," kind of a deal. So 1998, my first Le Mans, and our announcing platform we were up on the top of the tribunes, and that's where they had the announce booths, and we had the far end one, and it was great because there was this big gangway that kind of went out where we had our on camera location. And so we're going out there, and so it's time for us to get ready, and we're standing up there. And I remember earlier when I talked about all the cars echelon style, the flags, the air horns, all that energy, right? And we're up there,
Yeah.
and they said, okay, we're going to run through, we're going to rehearse the full first segment. And the way it went was Sam was the host, and I was the play-by-play guy. And so he did the hello, welcome, and all that kind of thing. And then he checked in with the two color guys, then came to me, and then we went and heard from the pit people, right? And so we rehearsed it, and they always roll tape on the rehearsal because we were not doing that live anyway, right? So they rolled tape on it, and at the end of it, Jeff Hallis, the producer, said, "Well, guys, you just did something that is very rarely done. Is we roll tape on our first rehearsal, and it doesn't get better than that. That we're done. You can relax." So now we're just hanging up, up there. Well, we had a monitor, and we had our headsets on so we can hear everything. So we get the count to the start of the show, and it goes. And Sam Posey's had written this 2-minute tease that they'd done the editing to that was absolutely is magic. So then it comes out, and he's standing there. There he is. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Sam Posey. Welcome to the Circuit de la Sarthe and the legendary 24 Hours of Le Mans. And he goes through his open, and then and I'm standing there up there on the thing with my headset on. And then he throws it, he had thrown it to David Hobbs, who did his spiel, then to, I can't remember who the other guy was. Oh, it was Hobbs. And then he came and he said, and our newest member of the team, and making his debut as play-by-play here at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, it's a pleasure for me to welcome in Greg Creamer. Greg? And I'm watching the monitor, and there's Sam Posey with the headset and the microphone, turns and introduces me. And I kid you guys not, I had to grab the railing because my knees started to shake.
Oh my goodness.
And I almost buckled because I had watched Sam on Wide World of Sports as I was growing up, wanting nothing more than to be somehow involved in racing. And he just turned and introduced me as the play-by-play guy at Le Mans.
That's cool, Greg.
That was the most magic moment of my career.
I got
That's
goosebumps.
incredible. Yeah.
People in the
Wow.
chat have
Me too,
goosebumps too.
believe me.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. Randy didn't really have a great answer.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know if I made it yet.
Yeah, you.
Randy's one of my favorite human beings, and this would be a great way to leave it. He had the second greatest answer to a question I've ever heard. Was the year in World Challenge where he had a shot at winning both the GT and a Porsche and touring car in one of the Tri-Point Mazdas. And Jeff Altenberg was leading in the points. This Road Atlanta, second to the last race in the season, and Randy was well out in front in the Porsche for GT, but he had a shot if he finished well ahead of Altenberg and closed the points up, he could go into Sonoma and win them both, right? TC races first. Randy starting the final lap is second. Altenberg's like ninth, right? Randy, coming around to start the final lap, Randy comes up the hill through the dip, comes up the hill, and gets taken out by a lap car. No, that was post dip. So he ended up in China Beach. Meanwhile, two guys wrecked coming out of 7, and then another car had to swerve to get around Randy and get stuck. So on the last lap, Randy goes from second to dead last. Altenberg goes from 9th to 5th and gets those points, and it's pretty much done, right? So then there's a whole day of stuff, Trans Am, all this. End of the day, it's now GT time. Dorsey and I in the booth, I throw it down to Brian Till for the interview, and I throw it to Brian, and Brian says, Randy, you had a shot coming in here winning both championships. It looked like you were doing exactly what needed to happen in touring car, and then you had the problem, and now it looks pretty difficult there. What do you do now in this race to put all that behind you? How do you put all that behind you to focus on this race? And Randy, with that wonderful Dudley Do-Right voice of his, looked at Till and went, "Ha, Brian, ADD." We were dead. We were gone. There was
Freaking
no
Randy.
way. Oh my God, there was no way Brian or Dorsey and I could have picked it up because we were on the floor.
Yeah. Because then you gotta like keep talking, but like meanwhile you're just
Exactly.
dying. Yep.
Exactly. It was one of the funniest lines I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, that's amazing.
And he said it all cheery.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, just
Yep.
Brian, with that laugh and everything. So you just, and then he, said, you
Oh,
do
that's
what you need to
amazing.
do here. But it was wonderful. And if you do want me back at some point, I'll tell you the best answer to a question ever. We're out of time, right?
I think
Deal.
we are out of time. Very sorry that
Someone's gotta
had
go
a hard,
work.
yeah, I had a hard cutoff. But
Greg, thank you so much
yeah,
for
thank you so much
spending
for coming on.
even extra more time with us.
Oh, my
What
pleasure.
are you up to this weekend? Anything
Another
fun?
off weekend. I was supposed to be going to the Historics at Chicago at Road America and announcing that, and they decided they only needed one announcer, so I
They're
get another
lost.
weekend at home. So
They're
I get
lost.
to prep a little bit more for the next E1 race that'll be happening in Monaco,
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
and I'll be in a studio in London, but I'll be loving it.
It's so wild that you fly to London to do
I
the-
know. I know. I get the feeling that after this year, if they keep me at it, they'll probably go, all right, you can do it at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll see.
What about you, Tom?
Yeah.
I
what
am
you
going
guys
to
up to?
pit. I'm going to pit race this weekend for more coaching. What about you, DJ?
I'm going to pit race to autocross. There's a 2-day event, and Ito's coming out. You'll be able to see Ito this weekend, Tom.
Awesome.
Do you want to
And,
play?
hey, guys,
Go ahead.
you're going to pit race. I just want to jump in. I went there for the first time 2 years ago with Moto America. I left that place, and it's in my top 5 tracks I've ever been to. That
Great
place
facilities.
is magic.
Yeah, it's really
Oh,
good.
what a racetrack. Seeing super bikes go through turn 2 is one of the more spectacular things you could imagine.
Oh, for sure.
Wheeling over that and hoping they don't overshoot it on the landing. It's great.
Yeah.
Great place.
All right, Tom, you ready to do the outro?
Yep, Greg, I'm going to take us out here. So we're
All
going to
right.
drop on the music. But honestly, I can say a moment that I realized I made it is when I was in a race that you were commentating, because I grew up with
Bravo.
you and I respect you so much. So I love your hair and I hope you win.